Hey everyone, welcome. Today we're going to tackle a maneuver that really separates the good pilots from the great ones, the short field landing. We're going to break it all down and hopefully turn what can be a pretty intimidating challenge into a precise, repeatable skill you can count on. You know the feeling, right? We've all been there. You're on final, you're looking at this little strip of pavement, and you're thinking it looks more like a welcome mat than an actual runway. But what if you could confidently nail that landing every single time? Well, that's exactly what we're going to get into today. So, why is this skill so important? Well, it's not just for some remote backcountry strip. You might be facing a genuinely short runway, or you could have a perfectly long one, but with obstacles like trees or power lines sitting right on the approach end. In either situation, mastering this maneuver is all about achieving ultimate precision and control of your aircraft. At its core, a short field landing isn't just about getting the plane on the ground. It's about touching down on a specific spot and then stopping in the absolute minimum distance possible. You can almost think of it as a game of energy management, and today we're going to learn the rules to win. You know, a perfect landing doesn't just happen 10 feet above the runway. Nope. It starts way back in the traffic pattern. Getting the approach right is the absolute foundation for everything that comes after, so let's really break down that setup. Okay, so the big thing here is to give yourself time. A slightly wider pattern helps prevent you from feeling rushed. You want to get configured early, get those full flaps in, and then lock in your airspeed. Now, the target, unless your pilot's operating handbook says something different, is 1.3 times VSO. That's your stall speed in the landing configuration. So for example, if VSO is 47 knots, you're going to be holding a rock-steady 61 knots on your final approach. And that right there, that is the whole point of getting stabilized. When you're stable, you don't float halfway down the runway, just eating up all that precious pavement. Instead, you are in absolute control, totally ready to put the wheels exactly where you want them. All right, now this is where things get a little weird, especially for pilots who are used to normal landings. When you're slow, you're low, and you're configured with full flaps, the way you control the airplane feels, well, it feels completely backwards. Okay, so this is where everything you think you know about flying kind of gets flipped on its head. In normal flight, right, we pitch for altitude and we use our power for speed. But on a short final, you're on what we call the backside of the power curve. And here, you use pitch to control your airspeed, and you use power to control your glide path. So if you're getting a little low, you add a little touch of power. Need to slow down a knot or two, you gently pitch up. Seriously, this is the one phrase you need to burn into your brain. Power for glide path, pitch for airspeed. It's gonna feel totally unnatural at first, I promise. But with practice, it really does become second nature. And once it clicks for you, you'll unlock this incredible level of precision on every single approach. Okay, so what about those dreaded trees at the end of the runway? This is where we have to adjust our technique just a bit to handle an obstacle safely. To clear that obstacle, you're actually gonna fly a much steeper angle than your standard 3-degree glide slope. What this does is it lets you drop in safely over the obstacle and still touch down right at the beginning of the runway. That gives you every available foot of pavement to get stopped. But of course, there's a trade-off here. The advantage is obvious, right? More runway to work with. The challenge, though, is that you're coming down a lot faster. That higher descent rate means your flare has to be way more deliberate and perfectly timed to arrest that descent for a smooth touchdown. And the margin for error here is razor thin. If you flare too late, you're going to hit hard. If you flare too early, you could bleed off too much speed, stall, and just drop onto the runway. Getting this timing right, that's a feel that you can only really develop through practice. Okay, so you've nailed the approach. You're stabilized, you're on speed. Now for the payoff, the touchdown and rollout. This is where all that precise control really comes together. Let's just break this down into 4 simple, clear steps. First, as you cross the threshold, smoothly pull the throttle all the way to idle. Second, you're going to flare to bleed off those last few bits of airspeed, aiming for that minimum speed touchdown. Third, as soon as the mains are on the ground, immediately start aerodynamic braking. And finally, number 4, apply your wheel brakes smoothly and progressively to bring the plane to a stop. Remember what we said about energy? The whole goal here is to touch down with the lowest possible energy. You want to touch down at minimum controllable airspeed. We're talking just a hair above the stall. This means your ground speed is as slow as it can possibly be, which is the absolute key to having the shortest possible ground roll. Now, this next part, aerodynamic braking. It's a technique a lot of pilots don't use enough, but man, is it effective. As soon as your main wheels touch down, keep pulling back on that yoke. This does two things. It holds the nose up for drag, but crucially, it keeps the weight of the aircraft planted firmly on the main gear. That makes your brakes way more effective and helps prevent any skidding. Okay, so now that we know how to do it right, let's take a quick minute to talk about what can go wrong. Because honestly, just being aware of these common mistakes is half the battle in avoiding them. Let's run through the top 5 mistakes you want to avoid. Coming in too fast, you're going to float forever. An excessive descent rate, well, that pretty much guarantees a bone-jarring landing. An unstabilized approach is really the root of almost every other problem. And then once you're on the ground, locking up the brakes or slamming that nose wheel down is just a recipe for damage. Look, if you take away just one thing today, let it be this. Nearly every single landing error, good or bad, can be traced right back to an unstabilized approach. If you master the approach, the landing will follow. It's that simple. So the next time you're on final, looking at that short runway, don't see an obstacle. See it as an opportunity, a chance to put these skills to the test. Because with a stable approach and precise control, no runway is truly impossible. The only question is, where are you going to go next?